It is an act that has always been considered morally reprehensible, and the term is frequently employed in international propaganda to denounce and discredit an opponent's foreign policy. What, you may ask? Imperialism is what I'm talking about. But first things first, let's understand. What is imperialism? Between the 18th and 20th centuries, many powerful countries, including Britain, France, and Germany, engaged in imperialism, which involves a stronger nation dominating a weaker one. This period is known as the Age of Imperialism in European history. The main motives during imperialism were economic, political, and religious. The Industrial Revolution increased the demand for natural resources such as coal, iron, and rubber to fuel newly invented machinery and transportation. Some nations lacked these resources domestically and sought to acquire them from other regions to support their industrialization efforts. Imperialism in ancient times is evident in the histories of China, Western Asia, and the Mediterranean, marked by a continuous succession of empires. The Assyrian Empire, known for its tyranny, was succeeded by the more liberal Persian Empire from the 6th to the 4th century BCE, which treated subjected peoples more fairly and enjoyed long-lasting stability. The Persian Empire was eventually replaced by Greek imperialism, reaching its peak under Alexander the Great from 356 to 323 BCE, who unified the Eastern Mediterranean and Western Asia. However, Alexander's vision of a cosmopolitan society where all people lived harmoniously together remained unrealized. The Romans later established their own empire, stretching from Britain to Egypt, partially fulfilling the dream of a unified world community. After the fall of Rome, the concept of empire as a unifying force was not achieved again. Instead, nations in Europe and Asia, influenced by Islamic civilization, pursued their own imperialist agendas, leading to division among peoples. In the modern era, three main periods saw the creation of vast empires, primarily through colonial expansion. From the 15th century to the mid-18th century, countries like England, France, the Netherlands, Portugal, and Spain established empires in the Americas, India, and the East Indies. Following a brief period of relative calm, marked by a reaction against imperialism, intense imperialistic policies resurfaced between the mid-19th century and World War I. But really, why imperialism? Venturing beyond its borders established a nation to tap into foreign markets, opening avenues to sell its industrial products. This shift often led to the displacement of traditional industries, as manufacturing and markets migrated to foreign lands. A striking example is the British East India Company, which soared to remarkable profitability by sourcing natural resources from India and peddling its goods across global markets. This strategic move not only bolstered the company's fortunes, but also reshaped the economic landscape, underscoring the transformative power of international trade and commerce. Imperialism was further fueled by nationalism, a strong sense of pride in one's country. Citizens took immense pride in the expansion and achievements of their nations. A popular saying of the era was, "The sun never sets on the British Empire," highlighting the vastness of British territories, ensuring sunlight somewhere within its dominion at all times. This sentiment sparked a competitive spirit among European powers, each striving to showcase their dominance and prestige on a global scale. However, this competition exacerbated existing tensions within European nations, leading to the eruption of conflicts and the spread of hostilities. Interestingly, imperialism extends beyond political and economic realms. It encompasses cultural dimensions as well. European powers, upon colonizing foreign territories, often adopted an attitude of superiority toward indigenous populations. They viewed native civilizations with disdain and perceived it as their duty to impart Western culture and education upon the savage inhabitants, a concept often referred to as the white man's burden. Religion also played a significant role in imperialism. Christian missionaries sought to convert indigenous peoples to Christianity and advocated for the abolition of the slave trade in Africa, aiming to integrate the continent into Western civilization. This intertwining of religion and imperialism underscored the complex motivations during colonial expansion during this era. Now that you know a little about the origin and past events of European imperialism, it's time to come back to today. In their modern form, arguments about the causes and value of imperialism has always been classified into four main groups. The first group of arguments surrounding imperialism revolves around its economic implications, often centering on whether imperialism is financially beneficial. Proponents of imperialism argue that it yields benefits such as access to human and material resources, markets for goods, investment opportunities, and outlets for surplus populations. On the other hand, critics such as Adam Smith, David Ricardo, and J.A. Hobson contend that imperialism may only benefit a privileged few rather than an entire nation. Marxist theorists, including Vladimir Lenin and N1 Bukharin, view imperialism as a later stage of capitalism, where monopolistic national capitalist economies seek to conquer new markets for their overproduction and surplus capital in competition with other capitalist states. However, this Marxist perspective is critiqued for its lack of historical evidence, and its failure to account for pre-capitalist imperialism and communist imperialism. Despite the differing viewpoints, the economic argument surrounding imperialism is a subject of ongoing debate and analysis. A second group of arguments regarding imperialism centers on the inherent nature of human beings and human groups, including the state. Figures like Machiavelli, Sir Francis Bacon, and Ludwig Lumpowicz, despite differing rationales, arrived at similar conclusions, endorsed also by Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini, albeit not for intellectual reasons. They view imperialism as a natural aspect of the struggle for survival, where those possessing superior qualities are destined to dominate others. The third group of arguments revolves around strategy and security. Advocates of this perspective argue that nations must acquire bases, strategic resources, buffer states, national frontiers, and control over communication lines for security reasons or to prevent other states from obtaining them. Critics argue that imperialism does not necessarily guarantee security. Rather, expanding a state's control beyond its borders often leads to friction and insecurity, as competing nations' safety zones and spheres of influence inevitably overlap. This argument is closely linked to the notion that nations are inherently imperialistic in their pursuit of power and prestige. The fourth group of arguments concerning imperialism is rooted in moral considerations, often with strong missionary undertones. Proponents of imperialism justify it as a means of liberating oppressed peoples from tyrannical rule or bringing them to the perceived benefits of a superior way of life. Imperialism is seen as a result of a complex interplay of various factors, including economic pressures, human aggressiveness, and greed, the pursuit of security, the desire for power and prestige, nationalist sentiments, humanitarian impulses, and numerous other motivations. This amalgamation of motives makes imperialism difficult to eradicate while also leading states that perceive themselves as potential victims to interpret policies that may not be intended as imperialistic. Some developing nations have accused former colonial powers and other states of practicing neo-colonialism. They fear that aid or the provision of skilled personnel for economic and technical development might serve as a guise for imperialist intentions. From all this information, I guess we can all agree that at some point, the negatives of imperialism are much more compared to the positives, right? It left a trail of devastation for millions worldwide, with particularly severe consequences for innocent people in Asia and Africa. These regions bore the brunt of suffering inflicted by invading European powers. Amidst this turmoil, countless individuals fought back against the oppression and exploitation, striving to reclaim their autonomy and dignity in the face of adversity. Now I know what you're asking yourself. What's currently been done? Under the umbrella of international organizations, efforts have been undertaken to address both the legitimate aspirations and illegitimate ambitions of nations through peaceful means. Various measures have been implemented for these purposes, including collective security arrangements, the establishment of mandates and trusteeship systems for dependent territories, the promotion of cultural exchanges between nations, assistance programs for developing countries, and initiatives aimed at enhancing health and welfare worldwide. These endeavors reflect a commitment to fostering cooperation and addressing global challenges through diplomatic and collaborative means. Well, just to lie on the good side of all these, we can say that some historical phenomenon shape the destinies of nations and individuals worldwide. But here's a question for you. How might the echoes of imperialism still resonate in our world today? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more thought-provoking content. Until next time, keep exploring history's untold stories.